This is not, I repeat, not a standalone video. Do not watch this video without watching the first video in this series on abortion, which is called Is Abortion Reasonable? I'll leave a card up here somewhere for it, as well as a link in the description. Go watch it before continuing to watch this video. The two videos are intimately related and necessary to watch together in order to understand my position on this incredibly complex issue. Now, without further ado, let's address the question that this video hopes to answer. Is abortion immoral? In the last video, we concluded that you can make a reason-based argument for abortion, but as a consequence of doing this, you must be willing to arrive at some rather shocking conclusions. Infanticide, the killing of born babies, is argued to be morally acceptable by the top minds of the pro-choice philosophical tradition. This, of course, is a problem. Because I, as well as 99.9% of all other people, both pro-life and pro-choice, do not feel comfortable with accepting infanticide, because it is completely out of tune with our moral instincts and intuitions. There's something about the idea of Santa feeding baby Buddy to Mr. Narwhal that just doesn't feel right. Since infanticide is almost universally seen this way, this leads me to believe that the pro-infanticide conclusions of Michael Tooley and others are doubtful, since our moral instincts and intuitions are precisely what motivate us to investigate moral questions in the first place. Now, I am not saying that moral intuitions or feelings on their own, without an argument contextualizing them, prove that something is wrong. But what I am saying is that something that is abhorrent to almost everyone's moral intuitions, such as infanticide, should at the very least be seen as extremely morally suspect from the get-go. If you are a person who holds the view that infanticide is not just morally suspect, but objectively morally wrong, then I think you will see by the end of this video that the pro-life perspective is the only perspective capable of providing good reasons for believing this. I think you will see that there are well-reasoned pro-life arguments that effectively challenge the pro-choice perspective as a whole, while satisfying our moral intuitions concerning the slaughter of munchkins. It goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. The rest of this video will be devoted to explaining why I believe abortion is immoral in nearly all circumstances. So it begins. To explain why abortion is immoral, we are going to have to talk about Why Abortion is Immoral by Don Marquis. You've probably never heard this argument before, and so I would advise that you all put on your thinking caps ASAP. In his piece, Marquis argues that the reason the pro-life versus pro-choice divide has remained strong throughout the history of abortion is because both pro-life and pro-choice thinkers have ignored a crucial question. What is the fundamental reason for why we think it's wrong to kill adult humans? Quoting Marquis, "After all, if we merely believe, but do not understand, why killing adult human beings such as ourselves is wrong, how could we conceivably show that abortion is either immoral or permissible?" Some of you might counter by saying adult humans are persons, therefore killing adult humans is wrong. But all that does is beg the question of what makes killing persons wrong. You still haven't explained why killing me would be wrong. You've just explained what I am. Others might say that adult humans have an interest in their own continued existence. Therefore, killing adult humans is wrong. But of course, some adult humans are suicidal. They don't have an interest in their own continued existence. And yet we all think suicide is immoral. So clearly, this explanation doesn't get at the core of what actually makes killing wrong. None of the arguments we referenced in the last video provided an adequate account of the wrongness of killing. Marquis's argument does, and I think his conclusions are convincing and have far-reaching implications. So let's unpack what he has to say. Fair warning, Marquise has a big vocabulary, so having your dictionary.com app open may be a good idea. One phrase I really think you should know the definition of, since Marquise uses it throughout his writing, is prima facie, which means based on the first impression, accepted as correct until proved otherwise. I'm going to be reading some fairly long quotations because I don't think I can put what he says in a better way. A necessary condition of resolving the abortion controversy is a more theoretical account of the wrongness of killing. After all, if we merely believe, but do not understand, why killing adult human beings such as ourselves is wrong, how could we conceivably show that abortion is either immoral or permissible? In order to develop such an account, we can start from the following unproblematic assumption concerning our own case. It is wrong to kill us. Why is it wrong? Some answers can be easily eliminated. It might be said that what makes killing us wrong is that a killing brutalizes the one who kills. But the brutalization consists of being inured to the performance of an act that is hideously immoral. Hence, the brutalization does not explain the immorality. It might be said that what makes killing us wrong is the great loss others would experience due to our absence. Although such hubris is understandable, such an explanation does not account for the wrongness of killing hermits, or those whose lives are relatively independent and whose friends find it easy to make new friends. A more obvious answer is better. What primarily makes killing wrong is neither its effect on the murderer nor its effect on the victim's friends and relatives, but its effect on the victim. The loss of one's life is one of the greatest losses one can suffer. The loss of one's life deprives one of all the experiences, activities, projects, and enjoyments that would have otherwise constituted one's future. Therefore, killing someone is wrong, primarily because the killing inflicts one of the greatest possible losses on the victim. To describe this as the loss of life can be misleading, however. The change in my biological state does not by itself make killing me wrong. The effect of the loss of my biological life is the loss to me of all those activities, projects, experiences, and enjoyments which would otherwise have constituted my future personal life. These activities, projects, experiences, and enjoyments are either valuable for their own sakes or are means to something else that is valuable for its own sake. Some parts of my future are not valued by me now, but will come to be valued by me as I grow older and as my values and capacities change. When I am killed, I am deprived both of what I now value, which would have been part of my future personal life, but also what I would come to value. Therefore, when I die, I am deprived of all the value of my future. Inflicting this loss on me is ultimately what makes killing me wrong. This being the case, it would seem that what makes killing any adult human being prima facie seriously wrong is the loss of his or her future. So Marquise's theory rests on the idea that what makes killing me, or you the viewer, wrong is what the killing does to us. In other words, it is the direct consequence of the killing which makes the killing wrong. Or as Marquise would put it, what makes killing wrong is some natural effect or other of the killing. To me, everything I've read thus far is solid and uncontroversial. But let's read on and see what reasons Marquise uses to bolster his theory of the wrongness of killing. The claim that what makes killing wrong is the loss of the victim's future is directly supported by two considerations. In the first place, this theory explains why we regard killing as one of the worst of crimes. Killing is especially wrong because it deprives the victim of more than perhaps any other crime. In the second place, people with AIDS or cancer who know they are dying believe, of course, that dying is a very bad thing for them. They believe that the loss of a future to them that they would have otherwise experienced is what makes their premature death a very bad thing for them. The view that what makes killing wrong is the loss to the victim of the value of the victim's future gains additional support when some of its implications are examined. In the first place, it is incompatible with the view that it is wrong to kill only beings who are biologically human. It is possible that there exists a different species from another planet whose members have a future like ours. Since having a future like that is what makes killing someone wrong, this theory entails that it would be wrong to kill members of such a species. Again, the logic here is sound, But what does this have to do with this little munchkin? I yet again yield the stage to Marquise. The account of the wrongness of killing defended in this essay does straightforwardly entail that it is prima facie seriously wrong to kill children and infants, for we do presume that they have futures of value. Since we do believe that it is wrong to kill defenseless little babies, it is important that a theory of the wrongness of killing easily account for this. Personhood theories of the wrongness of killing, on the other hand, cannot straightforwardly account for the wrongness of killing infants and young children. Hence, such theories must add special ad hoc accounts of the wrongness of killing the young. The plausibility of such ad hoc theories seems to be a function of how desperately one wants such theories to work. The claim that the primary wrong-making feature of a killing is the loss to the victim of the value of its future accounts for the wrongness of killing young children and infants directly. It makes the wrongness of such acts as obvious as we actually think it is. This is a further merit of this theory. So it's clearly wrong to slaughter this little fella after the time of birth. But what about before birth? The claim that the primary wrong-making feature of a killing is the loss to the victim of the value of its future has obvious consequences for the ethics of abortion. The future of a standard fetus includes a set of experiences, projects, activities, and such which are identical with the futures of adult human beings and are identical with the futures of young children. Since the reason that is sufficient to explain why it is wrong to kill human beings after the time of birth is a reason that also applies to fetuses, it follows that abortion is prima facie seriously morally wrong. To put it another way, the kind of future possessed by born human beings, which makes killing born human beings wrong, is the same kind of future possessed by unborn human beings. Therefore, killing unborn human beings is wrong. This is a clever argument, in my opinion, and this next passage is an illustration of just how clever it is. This argument does not rely on the invalid inference that, since it is wrong to kill persons, it is wrong to kill potential persons also. The category that is morally central to this analysis is the category of having a valuable future like ours. It is not the category of personhood. The argument to the conclusion that abortion is prima facie seriously morally wrong proceeded independently of the notion of person or potential person or any equivalent. Someone may wish to start with this analysis in terms of the value of a human future, conclude that abortion is, except perhaps in rare circumstances, seriously morally wrong, infer that fetuses have the right to life, and then call fetuses persons as a result of their having the right to life. Clearly, in this case, the category of person is being used to state the conclusion of the analysis rather than to generate the argument of the analysis. The fact that this argument doesn't need to rely on notions of personhood is a real merit of it. Because if there's one thing I've learned from reading about abortion, it's that defining precisely what a person is and when personhood begins is actually a very tricky business, even though it's obvious and natural to say that I, for instance, am a person. I mean, look, I've studied some really persuasive pro-life personhood arguments, but I would be lying if I said that pro-choice personhood arguments didn't make me pause. The cool thing about Marquise's reasoning is that it doesn't discount the merits of pro-life personhood arguments, but serves as a line of defense in the wake of their weaknesses. Now, a major objection to everything I've read and said concerning Marquise's theory thus far is based upon the claim that a necessary condition of one's future being valuable is that one values it. Value implies a valuer. Given this, one might argue that, since fetuses cannot value their futures are not valuable to them. Hence, it does not seriously wrong them deliberately to end their lives. This move fails, however, because of some ambiguities. Let us assume that something cannot be of value unless it is valued by someone. This does not entail that my life is of no value unless it is valued by me. I may think, in a period of despair, that my future is of no worth whatsoever, but I may be wrong because others rightly see value, even great value, in it. Furthermore, my future can be valuable to me even if I do not value it. This is the case when a young person attempts suicide, but is rescued and goes on to significant human achievements. Such young people's futures are ultimately valuable to them, even though such futures do not seem to be valuable to them at the moment of attempted suicide. A fetus's future can be valuable to it in the same way. Accordingly, this attempt to limit the anti-abortion argument fails. So by Marquise's logic, killing fetuses and suicidally depressed people is wrong, even though they do not value their valuable future, i.e., do not desire or have an interest in their own continued existence. Now in this next passage, Marquise decides to support his position even more by comparing the structure of his argument to the structure of perhaps the strongest argument for why it's wrong to wantonly or maliciously inflict pain on animals. The structure of this anti-abortion argument can be both illuminated and defended by comparing it to what appears to be the best argument for the wrongness of the wanton infliction of pain on animals. This latter argument is based on the assumption that it is prima facie wrong to inflict pain on me or you, reader. What is the natural property associated with the infliction of pain which makes such infliction wrong? The obvious answer seems to be that the infliction of pain causes suffering, and that suffering is a misfortune. The suffering caused by the infliction of pain is what makes the wanton infliction of pain on me wrong. The wanton infliction of pain on other adult humans causes suffering. The wanton infliction of pain on animals causes suffering. Since causing suffering is what makes the wanton infliction of pain wrong, and since the wanton infliction of pain on animals causes suffering, it follows that the wanton infliction of pain on animals is wrong. This argument for the wrongness of the wanton infliction of pain on animals shares a number of structural features with the argument for the serious prima facie wrongness of abortion. Both arguments start with an obvious assumption concerning what is wrong to do to me or you, reader. Both then look for the characteristic or the consequence of the wrong action which makes the action wrong. Both recognize that the wrong-making feature of these immoral actions is a property of actions sometimes directed at individuals other than postnatal human beings. If the structure of the argument for the wrongness of the wanton infliction of pain on animals is sound, then the structure of the argument for the prima facie serious wrongness of abortion is also sound, for the structure of the two arguments is the same. The structure common to both is the key to the explanation of how the wrongness of abortion can be demonstrated without recourse to the category of person. In neither argument is that category crucial. If I have done a good job of quoting and paraphrasing Marquise's argument, then I think you will be able to understand this final quotation, which sums up the essential logic of his reasoning. Since a fetus possesses a property, the possession of which in adult human beings is sufficient to make killing an adult human being wrong, abortion is wrong. I had never come across any version of Marquise's argument until I encountered this textbook in college. I'm happy to have introduced you to it because it is remarkably smart and does successfully combat the pro-choice arguments we covered in the last video. Marianne Warren's piece focused on whether or not fetuses have qualities and capabilities that would make them persons. In a related fashion, the focus of Michael Tooley's piece was centered around whether or not fetuses are capable of having interests. Marquise's argument, in contrast, is able to show not only that abortion is wrong, but infanticide also, while not even needing to prove that fetuses are persons or that they have interests. You know, this is all very fascinating, Carter, but the matter of fact is that you're not a woman. And you're definitely not a woman that's been impregnated due to rape. What do you say to those girls, particularly the very young girls who are in such a situation? Should they just suck it up and carry around a child that they never asked for in any way for 9 months? Do you really think they should be subjected to a living, constant reminder in their belly of the worst experience of their life? These are all good questions. If you recall though, I said at the beginning of this video that I thought abortion was immoral in nearly all circumstances. In other words, there are exceptions to the general rule of abortion being unacceptable. The two exceptions that most often come up in conversations dealing with this issue have to do with the mother's life being endangered, either directly or indirectly by the pregnancy, or when a woman has been impregnated due to rape. In the former case, I think the conclusion is obvious. If a mother's life is seriously in danger due to her pregnancy, or due to some life-threatening condition that can only be treated by ending her pregnancy, then the choice ought to be up to her as to what to do. This is a no-win, life-for-life situation. There are too many conflicting moral factors involved for anyone to judge what is or isn't the right thing for the mother to do. More than one future is at risk of being completely lost. It's like, what third party could properly decide such a situation? So if the mother wants to continue her pregnancy and risks the possibility of both she and her child dying as a result of not being treated for her health issues, then she should be able to take that risk. But if she does want to be treated so that her own life might be saved, while her child might have to be aborted or die as a consequence of treatment, then she should be able to make that choice. It's not a good choice. Neither choice is a good choice. But since the child is incapable of offering his or her own opinion, then the mother should be allowed to pick one awful choice over the other by virtue of the fact that she is capable and that her own life is at stake. It's horrible that the child has no voice in the matter, but it seems that there is no other way to look at this scenario than to allow the mother to make whatever decision she sees as right in such a wrong situation. Please note that abortions to protect the mother's life are rarely necessary. But now let's talk about the possible rape exception for abortion. The point concerning the traumatizing nature of being an impregnated rape victim is valid. That situation is one of the most horrific situations a woman could find herself in. I have no problem saying that, and the pro-life people I've seen who downplay the horrific nature of such a situation, I despise and distrust. With that being said, the morality of aborting a rape baby goes back to the question of whether or not the life of the fetus in the womb would be seriously wrong to destroy. We've been over this already. Given what I've said thus far in this video, it would be wrong to kill a rape fetus. Unless, of course, the mother's life was threatened by the pregnancy. However, I gotta be honest, I don't feel comfortable with saying that elective abortions in rape cases are totally out of the question. Hear me out. I think abortion is not the morally correct solution to this problem. It makes a messed up situation more messed up, in my opinion. However, I also think it would be damn near impossible for me to tell a 14-year-old girl that she has to give birth to a rapist's child. I mean, that's the kind of traumatic experience that could completely destroy a girl. But it's also the kind of traumatic experience that could make a girl stronger than ever if she got through it. It's a complicated and tragic circumstance that I as a man will never be in danger of physically experiencing, so what I will say is this. If there was a bill that made all abortions illegal, except in the cases where the mother's life is in danger, and yes, even in the cases where women have been impregnated due to rape, plus some additional cases we'll touch on in a minute, I would support that bill wholeheartedly, because it would eliminate almost all abortions. You heard that correctly. Such a bill, while not perfect, would eliminate almost all abortions. The time that pro-choice activists are the most disingenuous is when they discuss the rape issue. You can make all the solid pro-life arguments you want, and by and large, the pro-choice minded individual will come back at you with, you know, this is all very fascinating, Carter, but the matter of fact is that you're not a woman. And you're definitely not a woman that's been impregnated due to rape. Just 1% of all abortions are due to rape, and yet pro-choice activists use the rape issue as an excuse to allow abortion in general. It is the most disingenuous way to argue, because they know full well that most abortions are abortions of convenience, and that there is no compelling defense for a woman who had too much fun with her boyfriend one night and wasn't prepared to take responsibility for the life-creating nature of her actions, which she was aware of all along. The rape issue is complex and debatable. On the one hand, my heart goes out to rape victims and can understand why they would want the option to be rid of a child that was forced inside them by a monster. On the other hand, it seems to me that the unborn shouldn't be killed because their father just so happened to be that monster. I honestly go back and forth on this one, guys. So I see why the rape issue is such a difficult one for many people, including myself. But that does not change the fact that it is not an excuse for abortion in general. It should at best be seen like the issue of the mother's life being in danger, an incredibly rare exception to the rule that abortion is not acceptable. Other cases in which I think abortion is worth seriously discussing are even rarer than the cases we just covered, but nevertheless, I do think they are worth touching on. Anencephaly is a condition in which a baby does not develop large portions of its skull and brain. Often no more than a brain stem can be found, if even that. The condition can be diagnosed during pregnancy by means of ultrasounds and prenatal testing, or after birth due to the baby's severely deformed head. All anencephalic babies die during pregnancy or not very long after birth. It is a fatal condition. Aborting these babies before birth or euthanizing them by passive or active means after birth, so long as the condition is 100% confirmed, should be allowed in my view, because the question is not if the child is going to die soon, but exactly when. To put it in terms that Don Marquis might use, they simply do not have the possibility of having any kind of future, let alone one like ours, and so killing them would not be wrong. Now let's segue here into talking about the profoundly mentally disabled, because Marquis's value of a future like ours theory of the wrongness of killing does have implications for them. To be clear, when I say profoundly mentally disabled, I am not talking about people with Down syndrome or other mental disabilities of a similar severity. It would be wrong to abort such babies, because while their futures are different from yours or mine, they are certainly enough like ours to still be distinctly human and undeniably valuable. I mean, just watch The Peanut Butter Falcon and you'll see what I mean. No, when I speak of the profoundly mentally disabled, I'm speaking of humans who as adults, if they survive that long, will only ever achieve the cognitive abilities of a child less than 3 years old. There is a lot of variability within the category of the profoundly mentally disabled, though. Some members can move around to a considerable degree and complete some basic human tasks, while others cannot. As a consequence of being so profoundly mentally disabled, some individuals are incapable of controlling their basic bodily functions to the point where they cannot feed themselves and have significant trouble even rolling over in bed. This especially handicapped sort, who totally lack all adaptive behavior skills and exist in a fragile medical state, are referred to by some researchers as the absolute profoundly mentally disabled. They do not live long, and even if they do make it to adulthood, their years are filled with the pain and suffering that being bedridden entails. From here on out, when I use the phrase profoundly mentally disabled, know that I am using it in this absolute sense. According to Marquis's theory, aborting such individuals before they live their short and miserable lives would not be wrong because they do not have valuable futures, even remotely like ours. I actually take issue with this reasoning in this specific context. Let me explain what I mean. Someone I know personally was told that her baby was going to have all sorts of horrible problems and that she should get an abortion because her baby's future looked black. Well, guess what? She didn't get the abortion and her son is a normal guy with a full-time job. The reason I bring this story up is that this kind of thing happens far more often than people think. Doctors can be fallible in their judgments just like everyone else. And in the broader pro-life philosophical view, it would be beyond foolish to not take man's fallibility into account when considering the futures of others, even those who might be hindered in various ways. For as Gandalf says,
even the very wise can assume ends.
Diagnosing something like anencephaly in an unborn child can be done reliably, considering that the child's head looks like a deflated basketball. It's not always caught at this stage, but the idea is that if anencephaly is caught before birth, it can be confidently confirmed. Diagnosing the precise severity of a possible mental disability in a non-anencephalic unborn child, on the other hand, is a far more dubious business. Sometimes the quote-unquote profoundly mentally disabled turn out to be severely, moderately, mildly, or not mentally disabled at all, because diagnosing such conditions before birth is just not as straightforward as looking at an ultrasound and seeing that a baby has no skull. Even if doctors say there's an 80% chance an unborn child will be profoundly mentally disabled, my position is that such a child shouldn't be aborted, since there's still a significant chance that it won't actually be profoundly mentally disabled. It's like if there's a 2 in 10 possibility that someone with a valuable future is hiding behind a fence that you're planning to use for target practice, you shouldn't shoot at that fence. And furthermore, if there's a considerable chance that the person who came up with the 2 in 10 calculation for you made an error in their reasoning, I fail to see how shooting could possibly be the wise or moral thing to do given what's at stake. You see what I'm getting at? The fuller pro-life perspective takes into account that the probability of us fallible adults making a mistake in our estimations and predictions concerning the potentially profoundly mentally disabled is too high to warrant abortion. As the philosopher John T. Noonan puts it, pro-lifers are aware that in morals, as in law, prudence and negligence are often measured by the account one has taken of the probabilities. Now, if a child is born and it turns out to in fact be so profoundly mentally disabled that it will only ever possess the intelligence of a 2-year-old and live a bedridden, tube-fed existence for a handful of painful years, then I do think that euthanasia, by passive or active means, whichever will reduce the suffering of the child, should be a subject parents are allowed to discuss. An attitude of extreme caution towards killing or letting die should always be present, though, because misdiagnosing disabilities can even sometimes happen after birth. Christy Brown was thought to be profoundly mentally disabled during his early years, but eventually he figured out how to communicate with his left foot and ended up surprising his family and doctors by writing whole books. He wasn't mentally disabled at all, just physically disabled. Of course, Christy Brown was born in the 1930s, and so his mental condition went misdiagnosed for a long time, whereas if he were born today, with sophisticated brain scanning technology and comprehensive behavioral testing, he would quickly be shown to have a healthy brain so long as this extensive testing and scanning were actually done. The point remains, though, that our attitude towards putting the profoundly mentally disabled children of today out of their misery should be beyond cautious and only considered as a last resort. Some people are probably upset with me leaving open any possibility for this, but the matter of fact is that in some rare instances, ordinary moral prohibitions may not apply to extraordinary moral conundrums. If you're unconvinced, just imagine a scenario in which a child is born with a profoundly defective brain of the sort we've described, while also lacking arms and legs. Such a circumstance is extremely unlikely, but absolutely possible. And I think if we're all being honest, killing might be the moral and merciful thing to do in such a situation. I'm not advocating that a child in this condition should be killed, but what I am saying is that I couldn't judge the parents for making such a decision. And so I think parents in similar, albeit not identical scenarios involving the absolute profoundly mentally disabled should be allowed to decide what is best for their child. This attitude of caution and humility that I've been expressing towards killing even the most hopeless members of humanity is an attitude that colors pro-life philosophy through and through, while being almost completely absent in pro-choice philosophy. Pro-choice thinkers like Michael Tooley, Marianne Warren, Peter Singer, and many cultural and political figures as well are quite gung-ho about aborting not just the profoundly mentally disabled, but the mentally disabled in general, as well as the purely physically disabled. Back to the no arms and legs example, giving such a child a chance at life outside the womb, even if it has a perfectly functioning brain, is not something the pro-choice movement sees much benefit in. Pro-choicers do presume that it's simply not possible for a sound mind trapped in a deformed body of this sort to have a future that is valuable to itself or anyone, because in their pride they are blind to the fact that such an individual can inspire millions precisely because of having no arms or legs. Take, for instance, Nick Vujicic.
I didn't know that I had no arms and legs until I was born, and then I was born and I said, surprise! And the doctor said, we're so sorry, we didn't pick up that he had no arms and no legs. He's not going to have any quality of life. We're sorry we were not able to give you a choice to abort him. 1982. And they said to my mum and dad, he's never going to walk. So God says in the Word, He uses the foolish things of this world to confound the wise. How is it but a miracle of God? It's a miracle of God for a man without arms and legs to be His hands and feet, to boldly represent Christ as His ambassador and stand in front of the gates of hell and redirect traffic.
Not only would Nick Vujicic have been deprived of all the value of his beyond valuable future if those doctors had had their way, but so would all of us who have been inspired by his limbless but damn near limitless life. The pro-choice worldview often fails to consider stories like Nick's, and that's just another major reason for why I think it is a worldview that is unwise and immoral. To wrap up this part of the video, I must say that I cannot address every rare condition or circumstance in which abortion may be justified. But hopefully you can look at the reasoning behind the exceptions I have outlined and see how I might think about other possible exceptions. I also cannot address everything in Don Marquise's essay, which I've been basing a lot of my views regarding abortion exceptions on, even though he doesn't really get into abortion exceptions in his actual paper. Suffice to say, there are a lot of bits and pieces of Marquise's writing concerning his thoughts on the subject of euthanasia in general, as well as contraception, that I was able to glean insights from with regard to how I should write this portion of the video. If you'd like to take a look at an abridged version of Marquise's paper yourself to read these bits and pieces, I'll leave a link in the pinned comment below so that you can do that. Since we have now extensively answered the question that is the title of this video, I'd like to transition here and defend the pro-life perspective by providing some critiques of some pro-choice ideas that I have not had an opportunity to address. It is my theory that most pro-choicers who say that getting an abortion is no more wrong than removing an appendix believe this in part on the conscious level, while disbelieving it on a much deeper, more fundamental subconscious level. In Philip Devine's fascinating piece, The Scope of the Prohibition Against Killing, he provides support for this theory when he observes that many people who defend both abortion and capital punishment balk at the execution of a pregnant woman. If the pregnant woman isn't carrying a morally significant life in her womb, then why hesitate or be unwilling to embrace the idea of her execution when compared to others on death row? Or to remove the capital punishment idea from the equation, consider the Manson murders. Beyond them being brutal and tragic on their face, what made the murder of Sharon Tate particularly horrific to the pro-life and pro-choice masses? She was pregnant. Reading Devine again, some defenders of abortion also disapprove of experiments on live aborted fetuses, as well as experiments on fetuses in utero when abortion is intended. Again, if the lives of fetuses have no moral significance, why do many pro-choicers feel this way? I think it's because deep down, pro-choicers do recognize that the lives of the unborn are just as significant as their own. They've just been duped into not seeing this significance sometimes when they should see it at all times. They've also been duped into believing that abortion empowers women. The matter of fact is that millions of women don't exist precisely because of abortion. This can be seen ever so clearly in China. Infamously, China used to have a one-child policy. They don't anymore. Why? China abandoned its one-child policy because in Chinese tradition, male children are more desirable for the longevity of the family name and to sustain the parents as they age. So what did families do when they were told that they could only have one child? They aborted, abandoned, or committed infanticide towards their female fetuses and infants. As a result, China now has 30 million more men than women. While countries like America have never had a one-child policy, they have had abortion legalized for decades, resulting in the deaths of millions of female lives. It seems to me that abortion does not empower women. It only ensures that there are fewer of them. Whether you are pro-life or pro-choice, I would hope that you have been given some compelling things to think about regarding abortion in this video. I believe abortion is immoral. I believe I have made a credible case for that position, but I would never say it's black and white. To say that would be to lie, and lying about the convoluted nature of this issue is precisely why it divides us so effectively. If you are a pro-choicer who thinks I've got some things wrong in this video, please make your case in the comment section below. If you are a pro-life viewer who wishes to engage any pro-choice arguments that end up in the comment section below, please be respectful and honest. There are many other pro-life arguments out there that I did not cover, but I chose to cover the ones I did because I think they are extremely powerful and perhaps the least well known. Just goes to show that when you think you've heard it all on a particular subject, you most likely have not. So don't fall into the media abyss where useful idiots on TV and social media try to convince you that issues like abortion are black and white and that your neighbor who disagrees with you is a villain. If you fall prey to such propaganda and think yourself a righteous hero that is justified in treating your neighbor like a dragon to be slain, not only will you not convert them, but you will have become the dragon.